My name is Kinsley. I'm 27 years old. I just returned from a business trip to Los Angeles, where I signed the biggest contract of my career. I still remember the moment I stepped out of the taxi, full of excitement to share the good news with my family. But instead of laughter or open arms, what I saw were old suitcases and messy cardboard boxes piled up in the yard, as if my entire life had been tossed out overnight. My mother stood there, gripping the house key in her hand, her eyes cold and her words cutting like a knife. "You are no longer welcome here. This house has no place for you." Behind her, my siblings stood in silence, as if they had already agreed to condemn me long before. Every effort, every sacrifice, even the pride I carried back from another city instantly became meaningless. Have you ever found yourself cast out by your own blood, pushed away from the very place called home without a single warning? What would you do when the person whose approval you long for is the one who denies your existence? If this story touches a corner of your heart, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to my channel so we can continue this journey together. Because what happened on that fateful afternoon changed my life in ways no one could have predicted. I was born and raised in a modest two-story house in the suburbs of Dallas. Neighbors often called us the model family because on the surface, we had it all. A strong mother, 3 successful children, and the youngest daughter who was supposed to be sweet and obedient. But inside those walls, things were far from perfect. My father, Richard, was a quiet but warm man. He loved me in the simplest ways. Just sitting beside me, placing his big hand on my hair was enough to make me feel safe. But he left us too soon. I was only 8 when a sudden heart attack took away the only parent I ever felt close to. From that day, the atmosphere in the house shifted completely. My mother, Marjorie, had been gentle in the fragments of childhood memories I still carried. But after my father's death, she hardened, unyielding and in many ways merciless. She shouldered the burden of raising 4 children, but she also turned it into a tool of control. "I sacrificed my life for you. The least you can do is live exactly the way I want." That was her refrain, repeated at every family dinner. My oldest brother, Ethan, was her greatest pride. He excelled in school, got into a prestigious medical program and became a surgeon. Whenever she mentioned Ethan, her face lit up, her eyes glowing with self-satisfaction. My sister, Olivia, followed in his footsteps, becoming a lawyer. She was always in sharp suits, walking confidently as proof of the strict upbringing our mother imposed. Then came Brandon, the 3rd child. He wasn't particularly remarkable, but our mother steered him into accounting, ensuring he would have a stable life. They all followed the path she chose. To outsiders, that was success, proof of her vision and discipline. But for me, every one of their achievements felt like another weight fastened around my neck. I was not like them. From a young age, I loved to draw, cut and paste, turn scraps of paper into greeting cards, or imagine unique lettering styles. By high school, I had a clear passion for design, especially branding. I was fascinated by how a logo, a color scheme, or a font could touch emotions and make people remember a product or an idea. To me, that was art blended with strategy. But when I shared this dream, my mother looked at me as if I had spoken nonsense. "What are you going to do, doodle your whole life? How will you live on that? No one in this family is allowed to waste their life on things that don't bring real value." Those words etched themselves into my memory, echoing for years as a total denial of who I was. In the family, I was always branded the stubborn one. Not because I was rebellious, but because I chose a different path. I thought if I studied hard and succeeded on my own terms, she would change her view. But she never gave me the chance. At every meal, the difference between me and my siblings grew sharper. Ethan talked about intense surgeries he had completed. Olivia spoke of court cases, victories against opponents. Brandon rattled off numbers and profits. My mother listened to each of them with glowing pride. When it was my turn, if I shared about a new design project or creating a brand identity for a small business, she just sighed. "That can be called work, I suppose. But you need to think bigger, stop wasting time on trivial things." I learned to stay quiet. In that house, my voice didn't exist. Everything I said was cut off, criticized, or compared to the standards she had already set. As I grew, I realized that in her eyes, a child's worth was not in love or character, but in whether they could serve as proof of her sacrifice. Many nights, I lay awake staring at the old ceiling, wondering why I was born into a family where I felt like a stranger. I longed for my father for the way his smile alone encouraged me. I yearned for my mother to look at me like that one day, but that yearning only deepened the pain. My siblings, though pressured too, still benefited by following her path. They had her recognition, financial freedom early on, and they often treated me like I would never grow up. Ethan sometimes patted my shoulder. "You'll understand eventually, Kinsley. The safe path is the only future." Olivia sent me lists of clerical jobs at law firms as if to save me. Brandon smirked. "You're gambling with your career." Every comment was a small cut, shaving away what little confidence I had. Yet what they didn't see was that I wasn't lazy or irresponsible. I worked part-time in college to pay tuition. I applied for scholarships. I freelanced on small projects, all while keeping decent grades. I worked hard. The only difference was that my path was not theirs. My mother never openly threw me out during school years. Instead, her silence was heavier than scolding. I often overheard her whispering to neighbors, "My youngest. She hasn't found her way yet. Give her a few years, she'll come to her senses." But I didn't come to my senses as she wished. I grew more determined. After graduation, I chose a small creative advertising firm in Dallas instead of seeking a stable job. It wasn't famous, but it gave me room to prove myself. I worked day and night, twice as hard, trying to counter the disdain in my mother's eyes when I came home late. Deep down, I dreamed that one day my success would make her proud. I wanted to prove my path was meaningful, that love for creativity could sustain a person and bring value to society. But the unfair childhood, the control, the bitter comparisons planted a fear in me, that no matter what I did, in her eyes I would always remain the failed youngest child. That foundation made it all too easy for everything to collapse later, when she and my siblings decided to erase me from the family as if I had never existed. After graduation, unlike my siblings who left, I stayed in the Dallas house. Partly because of student debt, partly because my entry-level salary in branding wasn't enough to rent in the city. I agreed with my mother that I would pay monthly rent, contribute to groceries, and handle most of the housework. She nodded, but her eyes said it wasn't agreement, it was condescension. Every morning I made coffee for her, folded my bedding, vacuumed the living room before rushing to catch the bus to work. Evenings I cooked, set the table, washed dishes, did laundry. Sometimes, while scrubbing floors, I overheard her telling neighbors on the phone, "My youngest helps a little, but she still can't stand on her own like the others." Each word cut into me like salt on a wound. I paid rent regularly, often giving extra when she claimed hardship. Still, to her, I was not yet grown. I remember one evening when the whole family gathered to celebrate Ethan buying his first condo. My mother beamed, raising her glass, "Truly my pride." Olivia showed off pictures of the new mansion she and her husband had bought. Brandon announced he was about to become a partner in his firm. My mother's face shone with pride for each of them. When it was my turn, I quietly mentioned that a branding project for a small company had been approved and the client was happy. Before I finished, Brandon laughed. "Sounds like a student's side gig." Olivia snapped her laptop shut, looked at me. "You should consider something more stable, at least with proper benefits." My mother sighed. "I worry about you. If you keep this up, when will you ever buy a house?" I sat there with a stiff smile, a wave of humiliation and resentment rising inside me. I had been working day and night, taking on extra projects to earn more. I never spent recklessly. Every dollar went to paying off debt and contributing to the household. Yet in their eyes, I was nothing more than a burden living off this house. One evening, when I came home exhausted after a long shift, my mother called me into the living room. She held a printed copy of Brandon's performance report she had just pulled from her email. Her voice was full of pride. "Look at this. Brandon is only 30 and he's about to become a partner at his firm. Compare yourself to him." I bit my lip, trying to stay calm. "Everyone has their own path, Mom. I'm trying too." She stared at me. "Trying just to get by isn't enough. You need to think further." In moments like that, I felt small and pitiful. I had never asked for special treatment, only to be recognized for putting in effort in my own way. But in that house, the only standard that mattered was the path my mother had drawn long before. Anyone who strayed was labeled a failure. On weekends, when Olivia drove over with her wealthy husband, my mother always prepared a lavish meal. She laughed and chatted nonstop, boasting to the neighbors that her daughter had married well. Ethan brought expensive wine and she raised her glass, glowing with pride. Meanwhile, I sat in the kitchen slicing fruit, listening to the laughter echo from the living room, my chest tightening. When I carried the fruit platter out, she only said coldly, "Put it down, then stay quiet, don't interrupt while the grown-ups are talking." I froze, sat down at the edge of the table, feeling no different than a servant in my own home. More than once, Brandon made sarcastic remarks. "You call that contributing rent? Compared to what we give Mom, your share is nothing." My voice trembled as I answered, "Do you think I haven't tried? I do all the housework, I carry responsibility too." He only shrugged, poured himself another beer, treating my words like empty air. The differences in how my mother treated us were painfully clear. When Olivia was stressed from work, she immediately hired a cleaner for her and even asked me to help. When Ethan complained of fatigue, she cooked elaborate meals to nourish him. But when I burned with fever after sleepless nights on a project, she said only, "Take medicine and rest, don't bother anyone." Once I gathered my courage and told her directly, "Mom, I'm not a freeloader. I pay rent, I take care of the house, I work as hard as anyone." She raised her eyebrows. "If you really want to prove it, go rent your own place, pay the bills, handle everything by yourself. Only then will I consider you an adult." I stood there stunned. Hadn't I been doing exactly that under this very roof all along? Living there was like having shelter but also enduring constant contempt. It was a kind of halfway independence. I earned money, I carried responsibilities, but I was never acknowledged. And every time I saw her proud of my siblings, I felt myself pushed further back like a nameless shadow. I started saving every cent, cutting all unnecessary expenses. For lunch, I brought a cold sandwich. I walked extra blocks to save on bus fare. I didn't buy new clothes, only reused old ones. I thought if I could save enough for a deposit, I could rent a small place and escape that suffocating control. But with student debt still crushing me, that plan felt like climbing a mountain in a storm. At night, while freelancing on design projects, I pictured a different life. A tiny apartment, warm yellow light, my own bookshelf, no criticism, no comparisons, just me and my sketches. That thought gave me strength, but also pain because I knew I wasn't there yet. In my mother's and siblings' eyes, I was never enough. I didn't buy a house like Ethan, didn't marry rich like Olivia, didn't climb high like Brandon. But deep inside, I knew I wasn't useless. I was working, living, trying every day. Only in that house, no one chose to see it. I stayed, kept cleaning every corner, kept paying rent, kept enduring the comparisons. And slowly, the injustice piled into a quiet rage, waiting for the day it would burst. Work at the creative agency in Dallas was always hectic, but that fast pace made me feel truly alive. At first I was assigned small projects, but soon clients began requesting me by name. My boss, Mr. Miller, a man in his 50s, calm yet perceptive, always noticed the potential in overlooked employees. He often let me experiment freely, not confining me like others. One day he called me into the conference room. On the table lay a thick folder marked with yellow notes. He smiled. "Kinsley, this project could change the company's trajectory. A tech startup in Los Angeles is looking for a long-term partner for their product launch. They reviewed many big firms, but they noticed the concept you submitted in the trial pitch. I want you to lead the presentation team." I sat frozen, my heart pounding. I had never been entrusted with something this big. "Are you sure?" "I don't have much experience." He nodded firmly. "I believe in you. Sometimes freshness is exactly what clients need. You have the ability to create a unique visual language. Don't worry, we'll prepare thoroughly." From that moment, I threw myself into the work completely. I spent sleepless nights sketching drafts, testing colors, writing slogans, building ad concepts. Some mornings I stepped onto the office balcony to take a deep breath, chasing away fatigue, then returned to my desk with renewed fire. Watching the project take shape, I felt my confidence growing. The night before my flight to Los Angeles, I was still at my desk near 2 in the morning. Miller walked in with 2 cups of coffee. He set one down. "Stop working. You're ready. Tomorrow just trust yourself." Holding the warm cup, I looked at him with gratitude. No one had ever trusted me like that. When I arrived in Los Angeles, the energy was entirely different from Dallas. Skyscrapers glittered, billboards flashed, and I felt my heartbeat sync with the city. On presentation day, I stepped into a sleek conference room where over a dozen executives were waiting. The lights were cold, their eyes skeptical. I inhaled deeply, opened the first slide, and began. Word by word, image by image, I saw their expressions shift, from cautious to focused to nods of approval. When I closed with the slogan I had labored over for weeks, the room burst into applause. The CEO rose, shook my hand firmly. "This is exactly the direction we need." That evening, Mr. Miller took me to dinner. In the soft glow of the restaurant, he raised his glass. "Kinsley, you didn't just help us land a multi-million-dollar contract. You proved you deserve to be creative director. I'll officially recommend your promotion. Along with that comes a 20% raise." I sat stunned, my hand trembling as I held the glass. His words erased years of doubt and every insult I had endured. That night, back at the hotel, I opened my laptop and stared at the slides. Tears fell, not from exhaustion but from finally knowing I wasn't meaningless. I didn't need to be like my siblings to matter. I had worth in my own way. The next day, with a few hours before my return flight, I wandered through small shops in Los Angeles. I picked a turquoise silk scarf for my mother, remembering she once loved that color. I bought a fine pen for Olivia, craft beers for Brandon, and a pair of cufflinks for Ethan. I thought maybe these gifts would show I could bring home something to be proud of. When the plane landed in Dallas, I looked out the window, my heart full of hope. I had prepared the story I wanted to share at our next family dinner. I pictured my mother smiling at the scarf, Olivia admiring the pen, Brandon curious about the beer, Ethan nodding with the cufflinks. All I wanted was one look of recognition, even once, from those I loved. But reality crushed that hope the moment I stepped out of the taxi. Old suitcases and scattered boxes lay in the yard, proof that my family had written a different script for me. My mother stood at the door, the house key glinting in her hand, her voice icy. "You are no longer welcome here. This house has no place for you." In that instant, I carried the brightest triumph of my life in one hand and the deepest humiliation in the other. I clutched my bag tightly, feeling the gifts inside turn into symbols of the naivety I had been holding on to. I stood frozen in front of the gate, the place that had been my home all throughout childhood. The afternoon breeze swept through, sending scraps of paper from the cardboard boxes fluttering across the path. The scent of freshly cut grass drifted from the yard, but instead of peace, it stung me with bitterness. I slowly dragged the most battered suitcase out of the pile, the airline tag from my flight still clinging to it. My mother's voice rang out, so cold it made me shiver. "You have no place here anymore. This house has been sold. The buyers will move in before the month is over." I lifted my head, staring straight into her eyes. "What are you saying? Sold the house? Why didn't anyone tell me?" Ethan stood with his arms crossed beside her, his tone detached. "You're 27 now. You can't cling to this forever. We already discussed it. It's time you handled your own life." Olivia adjusted her hair, her face smug. "The buyers offered a very high price. This was an opportunity Mom couldn't refuse. This house has nothing to do with you anymore." My chest tightened. I could hear my blood rushing in my ears. All my belongings, every memory, even my father's presence, swept away in a single sentence. I forced myself to stay calm, speaking slowly. "Dad left a will. I remember clearly he wrote that this house belonged to all 4 of us. So why do you think you can make decisions without me?" The air went silent. Brandon glanced at Mom, uneasy, but quickly put on his sneer. "You've lived here for years without paying into the mortgage, so don't talk about shares. We're the ones who carried the burden." My hands clenched tight, my voice trembling but firm. "I pay rent every month, cover expenses, handle the housework, take Mom to appointments, fix her computer, manage everything. And you call that nothing? My mother cut in sharply. What you've done is the bare minimum. Your father died early, I carried everything. You've lived here cheaply for years. It's time to end it. I felt the air sucked out of my lungs. For a moment, my father's image flashed vividly in my mind, sitting in his chair, patting my head, saying, "This house belongs to all of you, everyone has a share." That promise was the only thing holding me steady. I looked directly at my mother, each word heavy. If Dad were alive, he would never agree with how you're treating me. You cut me out because you knew I couldn't fight back. Olivia shrugged, her voice dripping with sarcasm. We don't have time for complaints. The decision is made. If you want to sue, go ahead. But do you think you stand a chance against the three of us? Ethan added as if to finish it. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. This is for Mom's benefit. I let out a dry laugh, though tears blurred my eyes. For Mom's benefit or for your own wallets? Brandon started to say something but hesitated. For a flicker of a moment, I saw guilt cross his face. But it vanished when Mom shot him a warning glare. I bent down, picked up a small box labeled Keepsakes. Opening it, I found an old family album. Dad carrying me on his shoulders at a picnic, his wide smile at a birthday cake. My hands shook as I clutched it, feeling like I was holding the last remnants of love. Mom's voice rang out again, harsher. Take all your things and go. Don't come back. From now on, everyone takes care of themselves. My throat tightened. Do you really want to cut me off completely? She turned away without answering. Ethan sighed, Olivia checked her watch, Brandon stared at the ground. They stood together in a line, a wall of coldness shutting me out from what I once called home. In that moment, I realized I had been clinging to an illusion. I thought if I succeeded, if I brought good news, they would accept me. But the truth was they had erased me long ago. Today they simply sealed it. I carefully placed the album into my suitcase, locked it, and pulled it toward the car. The house key I had carried in my pocket now felt meaningless. I paused briefly, looking at the pale green walls and the window where I once studied, then turned my back. Behind me, my mother's voice carried out, "Don't come back, Kinsley." The words cut the last fragile thread tying me to family. I dragged the heavy suitcase down the street, every step weighed down by rage rising inside me. I hadn't just been thrown out. I had been betrayed, stripped of my rights, erased from the very place my father had meant to be mine. One thought echoed in my head. If they thought I would bow down and accept this, they were wrong. I loaded each suitcase into the trunk, tears streaming no matter how I tried to stop them. Every slam of the car door sounded like another piece of memory buried in that house. With shaking hands, I dialed the only number I still trusted. Claire, my college roommate of 4 years. Her warm voice came through and I broke into sobs. Kinsley, what happened? Through choking breaths, I explained. They kicked me out. All my things are thrown outside. I don't know where to go. Claire was silent for a second, then answered firmly, drive here right now. Our apartment has a spare room. Stay as long as you need. I drove on autopilot, tears clouding my vision. When I reached the small apartment complex where Claire and her husband Daniel lived, I had no strength left to carry my bags. They came running down, lifting each suitcase and box. Claire held my hand gently. Don't worry, you're safe now. The room they gave me was small, barely enough for a twin bed and an old desk. But stepping inside, I felt calmer than in any corner of my old house. I collapsed onto the bed, looked at the bare walls, and sobbed. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother and siblings. Their voices echoed, cold and final, tearing deeper into me. I remembered the gifts I had bought for them, still neatly packed in my suitcase, now symbols of my naivety. Hugging my pillow, tears soaked the fabric and I felt erased from my own family. The next morning, Claire knocked and walked in with a hot cup of coffee. She set it on the desk, sat beside me, her eyes filled with compassion but no judgment. You can't go on like this, Kinsley. You need to talk to someone professional. You need someone to show you the truth, that what they did wasn't your fault. I shook my head, my voice hoarse. But they're my family. How can I cut them off? I still feel guilty. Claire squeezed my hand. Real family would never treat you this way. You've been hurt for so long you can't tell the difference between love and control anymore. You need therapy to break free. The following days I felt like a ghost. At work I forced myself to act normal. I sat at my desk, adjusted designs, presented ideas. Colleagues praised my creativity, my boss nodded in approval. But back at Claire's, kicking off my heavy shoes, I sank to the floor empty. Sleepless nights left dark circles under my eyes. Daniel didn't say much, but he always saved food for me, always pulled out an extra chair at dinner. One evening, when I apologized for being a burden, Daniel simply said, "No one is a burden here. You need shelter and you have it." Those simple words choked me. I looked at them, seeing the genuine care I had once longed for from my own blood. A week later, Claire handed me a printed list from the internet. Therapists in the area. "Daniel and I already talked. Your company insurance definitely covers this. All you have to do is call and make an appointment." I held the paper, conflicted. I feared telling everything again. I feared a stranger's pity. But when I saw Claire's steady gaze, I gave a small nod. The day I went to therapy, I sat in the small hallway, clutching my purse tightly. Sunlight streamed through the window, but my body felt frozen. When the therapist, Mrs. Parker, opened the door and invited me in, her voice was gentle. "Please, Kinsley." In the quiet room lined with bookshelves, I sat on the sofa, hesitation filling me. Mrs. Parker smiled. "No need to rush. Just start with whatever you feel like sharing." I opened my mouth and everything poured out. I told her about the day my father died, about my mother's control, about the endless comparisons, and about the afternoon I came back from Los Angeles to find my suitcases at the gate. Tears streamed down my face, my throat tightening. Mrs. Parker listened, never interrupting, only nodding with encouragement. When I paused, she spoke softly. "Kinsley, what you went through wasn't normal care. It was control and rejection. The guilt you feel is the result of years of being made to believe you are responsible for other people's unhappiness." I sat still, my fingers trembling. Her words cracked open a light inside my head. For years, I had thought I was the reason my mother was exhausted, that I was unworthy, and that's why she treated me coldly. But now someone was saying clearly that I wasn't the cause of it all. When the first session ended, I stepped outside and took a deep breath. It wasn't relief yet, but there was a faint spark of hope. I realized that if I wanted to keep living, I had to learn to stand on my own feet, no longer waiting for acceptance from those who had abandoned me. That night, back at Claire's apartment, I sat with her in the kitchen. I told her what Mrs. Parker had said. Claire smiled, poured more tea into my cup. "I told you. You were never wrong for living true to yourself. They were wrong for not loving you the way you deserved." I looked at the steaming cup of tea, a feeling rising in me, pain mixed with lightness. I whispered, "Maybe I found my first step." Claire placed her hand on my shoulder, her voice steady. "And you won't take it alone." I spent nearly 2 weeks at Claire's before gathering enough courage to find a place of my own. After work, I scrolled through rental websites, making calls everywhere. Rent in Dallas wasn't cheap and requirements were strict. Good credit history, stable contracts, and large deposits. I had nothing but a small savings and my job I was clinging to. Many times after being turned down, I wanted to give up. But the memory of that afternoon when my things were tossed outside made me clench my fists. I couldn't go back to being weak. Finally, I found a tiny studio on the second floor of an old building near downtown. When I stepped inside, the paint peeled off the walls, the wooden floors creaked. The kitchen was nothing but a steel sink stained with time. Yet my heart warmed. That shabby room belonged to me. No one could throw my things out without asking. On moving day, Claire and Daniel helped carry my suitcases and boxes. Friends from work joined in too. Angela brought an old set of pots, Tom carried a chipped wooden table, and Maria brought clean floral curtains. As everyone arranged the space, laughter echoed in the once empty room. I looked around and saw chaos turning into life. Claire hugged me, whispering, "Not a mansion, but at least it's yours." I smiled, tears in my eyes, answering, "Exactly. And here no one can belittle me again." That first night, I lay on a used bed I had bought cheap from a thrift store. The dim light bulb glowed, curtains swayed with the breeze. Outside were cars passing, dogs barking, but to me it was the song of freedom. I curled under the blanket Claire lent me, feeling both lonely and strong. Work at the company kept getting better. After the Los Angeles project, I was given bigger clients. Miller introduced me at a leadership meeting. "This is Kinsley, the one who opened a new path for us." My heart pounded, but my colleagues' respectful glances held me steady. I threw myself into work, bringing bold ideas. Each successful campaign affirmed another piece of me. Long nights in front of the screen no longer felt like chains but like passion. I no longer had to prove myself to anyone but me. With my first increased paychecks, I didn't splurge. I bought a small sofa, a few cheap prints to hang on the walls. Each new item added to the studio felt like a brick in the foundation of independence. I assembled a wooden shelf myself. It took nearly 2 hours and left scratches on my hands, but when I saw my books neatly lined up, I smiled with pride. Maria invited me to join a yoga class at a nearby center. At first, I hesitated, but then I thought I needed change. On the first day, I sat on a green mat, listening to the instructor's deep voice. "Let go of what doesn't belong to you." The words pierced me and tears slipped out. I bowed my head low so no one could see, but inside I realized I was slowly learning to release the old chains. Through yoga, I met new friends. A group of older women often invited me to dinner after class. They shared stories about marriage, children, losses, and strength. I listened, feeling small but also empowered. One evening, Linda, who was over 60, looked at me and said, "You're still young. Don't let others define who you are. You have the right to choose how you live." I was stunned. Her words felt like medicine for my unhealed wounds. I began accepting more invitations to social activities, art exhibitions, library talks. I used to avoid crowds, fearing judgment, but now I wanted to give myself a chance. In those spaces, people knew me only as Kinsley, the creative designer, not as the failed youngest daughter my family once labeled me. One evening, after dinner with the yoga group, I came back to my studio. I switched on the light and the room glowed. The furniture was old but tidy. On the table, the small cactus Maria had given me bloomed white flowers. I realized I had come far, from being thrown out with tattered suitcases to having a home, even if small, and a life of my choosing. Every morning when I closed the door behind me, I felt a rising faith that I could keep going. No one stood at a gate to judge me anymore. No cold eyes to deny me. I inhaled deeply, taking in fresh air, then walked forward on my own 2 feet. One April evening after work, I unexpectedly ran into Mr. Harris, the lawyer who had represented my father for many years. I recognized him instantly, his silver hair, slower gait, but sharp eyes just like when I was little, when he came to the house with documents for Dad. He smiled. "Kinsley? Richard's daughter, right? It's been so long." We sat down at a cafe near downtown. Talking about Dad made my throat tighten, but I answered, "I always miss him. There are so many things I never understood." Harris set down his cup, his eyes serious. "Since you said that, I need to ask. I recently heard about the sale of the Dallas house. Were you ever informed?" I forced a smile. "Not at all. I only knew when they threw my things outside." He frowned slightly, sat quietly for a moment, then pulled an old folder from his briefcase. "I still have a copy of your father's will. He made sure the house and the investment account would be divided equally among the 4 children. That account was worth a significant amount. When Richard passed, it was enough for all of you to have a strong start. Has your mother ever mentioned it?" I froze. An investment account? I had never heard of it. Mom never said a word. Ethan, Olivia, or Brandon had never brought it up. My voice shook. "You mean, that money is still there?" Harris shook his head, speaking slowly. "No. I checked recently. That account was emptied 3 years ago. The person managing it after Richard's death was your mother." I clenched my hands so tightly that my nails dug into my skin. That money, it belonged to all 4 of us. How could she? Harris looked at me, his eyes full of regret. "If you want, you can sue. But it will be complicated. You must prepare yourself because you'll be facing your own family." I sat there, the noise of traffic outside fading into distance. My mind spun, remembering my mother's cold eyes when she told me I had no place in the house. It turned out they hadn't just thrown me out, they had hidden the inheritance my father left for me. That evening, back in my studio apartment, I tossed the keys onto the table and collapsed into a chair. Claire rushed over, seeing my pale face. "Kinsley, what happened?" I told her about the meeting, my voice breaking. "Dad left us money. But Mom took it all. If it had been divided fairly, I wouldn't be drowning in debt, I wouldn't have been thrown out." Claire's eyes filled with tears. She gripped my hand. "My God. That means they didn't just betray you emotionally, they stole from you too." I buried my head on the table, choking. I don't want to believe it, but every piece fits. Their silence, the sudden sale of the house, the way they treated me like a burden. They had planned this all along. That night I couldn't sleep. I opened the old album I had carried when I was thrown out, staring at my father's kind face in every photo. I whispered, "Dad, I never knew the truth. They took everything from me." My tears dripped onto the faded pictures. The next morning I called Mr. Harris. "I want copies of the will and all related documents. I need to see them with my own eyes." He arranged for me to come to his office. Holding the papers stamped with red seals, I read every line. "All assets, including the house in Dallas and the investment account at the bank, will be divided equally among the 4 children. Ethan, Olivia, Brandon, and Kinsley." There was no ambiguity, no vague language. My father had thought of me, giving me equal rights. Yet my mother and siblings had erased me in silence. A surge of pain and anger rose inside me. For years, I had struggled to prove my worth, while my rightful inheritance had been stripped away. I remembered every scolding from my mother, every look of disdain from my siblings. It all became clear. They didn't just despise my career choice. They had already decided I had no place in the family. That evening I called Brandon. His voice on the phone was uneasy. "Kinsley? Why are you calling this late?" I kept my tone steady. "Did you know about the investment account Dad left?" There was a long silence. Brandon finally spoke quietly. "Mom told us. She said it was for the family and that you didn't need to know." My throat tightened. Didn't need to know? That was Dad's money for all 4 of us. How could you agree to let her take it all without protest? Brandon stammered. I didn't want to confront her. Neither did Ethan or Olivia. Mom said she would invest it, then divide it later. I pressed each word. "And what happened?" "I was thrown out, lost my legal share while you all stayed silent." Brandon was quiet, then sighed. "I'm sorry, Kinsley. But knowing now won't change anything." I hung up, my chest twisting. Sitting in the dark, I realized I was no longer just the girl who cried. I had evidence, I had the truth. And most importantly, I had a choice. Stay silent or stand up for what my father intended me to have. Claire looked at me, her voice firm. "You can't let them keep trampling you. You have the right to reclaim what's yours, not just for money but for dignity." I nodded, a fire rising in my heart. Their betrayal had cast me out, but this truth gave me a reason to rise. I was no longer the disregarded youngest. I was the one who would fight for justice. Only a few months after discovering the truth about my father's account, scattered news of my family started reaching me like shards of broken glass. First came a call from one of my mother's old church friends. She whispered, "Did you know? Your mother was scammed in an investment deal. She gave all her savings to a man claiming to be a financial expert. He disappeared." I gripped the phone tightly, my chest twisting. That was the money she had taken from the shared account. Bitterness surged through me. Not long after, news about Ethan spread through the local medical community. He had been sued by a patient for a surgical error. The case made the papers, his reputation collapsing. I overheard coworkers whispering, "That surgeon used to be a rising star, now his license is suspended." I hurried away, afraid they'd see the tremor in my eyes. Brandon wasn't doing better. One night, a text appeared from an unknown number. "Kinsley, it's Brandon. I'm in big trouble. I need to talk to you." I didn't answer. But later, through old friends, I learned he was drowning in gambling debts, chased by creditors to his office. He had to sell his car and move out of his luxury apartment. And Olivia, the one who once flaunted her mansion and successful husband, suddenly vanished from social media. Then I heard she had gone through a loud divorce. Her wealthy husband not only left but took most of the assets. Now Olivia was left to raise 2 young children alone, stripped of her glamorous life. While each of them faced crisis, my phone began buzzing constantly. Short texts from Mom, "We need to talk." Then longer ones, "I've lost everything. You're my only hope." Ethan sent an email, blunt, "Kinsley, I know we've had our differences. But I need a large sum to settle this case. Please consider." Brandon called dozens of times, leaving pleading voicemails. "I regret everything. I was wrong. Help me just this once." Olivia texted repeatedly, "Kinsley, can you loan me some money for rent? For the kids' sake. I'm begging you." I read every word, my heart tangled. These were the same people who had cast me out, now begging me to save them. I didn't reply. I focused on work, on new projects. But they didn't stop. Each morning when I turned on my phone, my inbox overflowed with pleas, even threats. "If you don't help, you'll be seen as ungrateful to your family." I thought I was prepared for cruelty, but nothing could have readied me for the day my mother appeared at my workplace. That day I was in a meeting with Mr. Miller and new clients. The door suddenly burst open and my mother walked in. She still looked the same, hair neatly combed, dark coat, eyes sharp yet desperate. The whole room froze. I was stunned as she said, "Kinsley, you must come home right now. I need your help. You can't turn your back when your own mother is in ruin." My face flushed hot. I stood, struggling to stay calm. "Mom, this is my workplace. We can't discuss personal matters here." She didn't lower her voice. She turned to the clients as if making them witnesses. "Do you know, I raised her my whole life and now she abandons her family in crisis? She owes us." The air in the room grew suffocating. I heard whispers from colleagues. Miller cleared his throat, glanced at me, his eyes urging me to handle it. I inhaled deeply, then spoke clearly, "Mom, please step outside. I'll call you later." Her eyes flashed with anger and desperation. "You're my blood. You can't be this heartless." I walked to the door, opened it and pointed out, "I'm sorry, but you must leave. This is not the place for this." After a pause, she gripped her purse tightly and walked out, leaving behind stunned faces. When the door shut, silence filled the room. Miller looked at me, his voice low. "Do you want to take a break?" I pressed my lips, forcing back emotion. "No. Let's continue." The meeting dragged awkwardly, but I finished my presentation. The clients nodded, seemingly unbothered, but inside I was shaken. Afterward, Mr. Miller asked me to stay. He looked straight at me. "Kinsley, I won't interfere in your private life. But understand this. Your work here is earned by you. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone else. Don't let them pull you down." I sat there, overcome with emotion. He didn't ask for details, didn't demand explanations. He simply gave me the recognition I had longed for all my life. That evening, back at my apartment, my phone lit up again with endless messages. Mom wrote long texts, saying she had lost everything, scammed by someone she trusted, now with no place to stay. Ethan demanded money to settle his lawsuit. Brandon admitted his gambling debts, begging me to save him from bankruptcy. Olivia described her ex-husband leaving her, pleading for money to raise her kids. I read them all, my heart heavy but my hands no longer trembling. Sitting by the window looking down at the lit street, one thought burned clearly inside me. I could feel compassion, but I could not let them drag me back into the old cycle. What I had lost they never returned. And now when they had fallen they saw me as their lifeline. The night wind blew through, sharp and cold, but it cleared my mind. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes and wondered, had the time come for me to face them directly, to finally say everything I had never dared to say? I knew I couldn't let it linger in the shadows anymore. The begging calls, the relentless texts, even my mother showing up at my workplace. All of it had reached the point where I needed one face-to-face reckoning. Called Mr. Harris, the old lawyer who had worked with my father, and said, I want a meeting. Everyone must be there and the truth must be laid on the table. He agreed, his voice steady. All right, Kinsley. It's time. On the appointed day, I arrived at the law office half an hour early. The conference room wasn't large, but it was elegant, with a long dark wooden table stretching across it. Sunlight poured through the windows, making the atmosphere even more tense. I sat down, took a deep breath, my heart both trembling and firm. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door opened. My mother walked in, followed by Ethan, Olivia, and Brandon. She held her head high, though she looked tired and much older. Ethan's suit was wrinkled, Olivia's dark circles barely hidden beneath rushed makeup, and Brandon avoided my gaze, his face hollow. No one spoke as they sat down. Harris arranged his papers, then began slowly. We are here today to clarify the will of Mr. Richard Harrison. I am the one who drafted it and kept a copy so there can be no dispute. My mother frowned. That matter was settled long ago. Why dig it up again? Harris calmly placed a folder with red seals in the center of the table. Mr. Richard wrote clearly that the house and the investment account were to be divided equally among the 4 children. But according to bank records, the entire sum was withdrawn in the past 3 years under Mrs. Marjorie's signature. The room fell silent. Ethan turned to her, his voice sharp. Mother, what is this? I thought that money was being kept for all of us. Olivia slammed her hand on the table. You told us it would be invested and then shared. And now? Brandon lowered his head, muttering, I suspected, but I didn't think you would. My mother's face reddened, anger flashing in her eyes. Everything I did was to protect you. I had to control the money to be sure it wasn't wasted. How was I to know that man would scam me? I looked straight at her, my voice slow but firm. Protect us? Or cut me out from the start? You took my share of what Dad left. Not just mine, all 3 of theirs too. And instead of fairness, you turned it all into a secret. She snapped at me. Don't act so righteous. You lived off me for years and now you accuse me. I didn't back down. I paid rent. I managed the house. I carried responsibilities no one else did. While you secretly emptied Dad's account and called me a burden. You call that fairness? The tension was so heavy the sound of a pen rolling on the table was audible. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his voice bitter. All these years you made us believe Kinsley had no rights. Turns out you were the one violating Dad's will. Olivia let out a harsh laugh. No surprise. Your whole life has been about control. And now you've lost everything and dragged us down with you. Brandon finally looked at me, nodding slightly. Kinsley, I'm sorry. I was wrong to stay silent. I drew a deep breath, placing my hand on the folder. I didn't call this meeting to watch you fight. I did it for Dad. You wanted everything shared equally. But because of greed and silence, it all became a tragedy. My mother's voice shook. Are you planning to sue me? I met her gaze. I could. And I would win. But I don't want to drag family through court. I only want this clear. I will not leave you out on the street, but I will not let myself be used again. From now on, I will help in the way I choose, not in the way you command. All eyes turned to me. I spoke slowly, each word carved into the air. For you, Mother, I will arrange for a proper nursing home with doctors and caregivers. But I will not give you cash. And you will not live with me. For Ethan, Olivia, and Brandon, each of you must face your own choices. I will not pay debts, not cover mistakes. I can only advise you to confront them as I did. Ethan's mouth fell open, Olivia clenched her fists. Brandon lowered his head. My mother sat stunned, her eyes blank, unable to argue. Harris closed the folder, his voice steady. This is the most reasonable decision. If needed, I will prepare a written record for everyone to sign, to avoid trouble later. I rose, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I am no longer the child who could be dismissed. This is the final boundary. Whoever crosses it will face the consequences. The room was silent. My 3 siblings looked at me, then at my mother, their eyes a mix of blame and despair. For the first time they realized the balance had shifted. I was no longer the abandoned weakling. I was the only one who held the power to decide how far my mercy would reach. A year passed since that day in the lawyer's office, when I drew the final line against my family's control. That year felt like a lifetime, but it was enough to rebuild my shattered life, brick by brick. I moved out of the tiny studio after 8 months, when I finally had enough savings and the confidence that I deserved better. My new apartment was on the 12th floor of a modern building, wide windows opening to the city skyline. I still remember placing my hand on the keys the day I signed the contract. My hand trembled, not with fear but with joy. This was truly my home. No one could deny it, no one could throw me out. Work also reached the peak I had once dreamed of. After a string of successful projects, Mr. Miller called me into his office and handed me the title of creative director. "You're no longer just an excellent employee. Now you lead the team," he said proudly. I left that office walking as if on wings. Years of being labeled the failure had finally been erased by my own achievements. During that time, I met Daniel, a graphic designer who partnered with me on several projects. He wasn't flashy, but he carried a calmness that made me feel safe. In the evenings after work, we shared simple dinners, talked about films, work, and life. He never asked me to prove myself to others. He saw me as enough simply because I was me. His steady affection grew slowly, surely, unlike the shallow relationships my mother had picked apart or my siblings had mocked. But perhaps the biggest turning point was when I decided to turn pain into purpose. I remember sitting one night by the window of my new apartment, watching city lights flicker, thinking of the hundreds, maybe thousands of young people out there cast out by their families like I had been. I wondered, how many of them had a friend like Claire to open a door? How many slept in cars or wandered the streets? The thought stabbed at my heart. I opened my laptop and drafted a plan to start a small fund, using my own savings as the seed. Horizon Fund was born, aiming to help young people cut off by their families, covering deposits for apartments, basic necessities, and access to counseling. I called Claire. "I want you to co-found this with me." She cried on the phone, then laughed. "Of course. This is your mission." We organized fundraisers, wrote posts online, shared my story. To my surprise, many people responded. Some sent $50, others $500, even companies offered sponsorships. Within a year, the fund had helped over 30 young people find housing and a fresh start. Every time I received a thank you letter, I thought back to myself a year earlier, hugging a suitcase, crying outside my family's gate. Now I could reach out a hand to lift others from that same abyss. The day I stood on stage at a community talk, I looked out over a hall filled with young faces mixed with older ones. The lights shone down, the microphone in my hand. I took a deep breath. I told my story. From the girl whose belongings were thrown out of her home, to the woman who found strength in her own pain. I saw Claire sitting in the front row, and Daniel nodded slightly in encouragement. When I finished, I spoke slowly, each word carved into the heart. The day I was thrown out of my house, I thought I had lost everything. But it turned out I had been given the chance to find myself again. The entire hall rose in applause. The sound echoed, not just for me, but for everyone who had ever stepped out of the shadow of rejection to find their own light. I smiled, my heart lighter. From the ruins I had been reborn. And this time I was no longer afraid of losing. I had myself, my own home, a healthy love, and a purpose to keep moving forward. Each time I look back on the journey, I still shiver at the wounds inflicted by my own family. But then I realize what we think is the end can sometimes open a new path. I lost a home, but I found resilience, courage, and the true meaning of freedom. And what about you? If you were abandoned, stripped of what you thought would always be your shelter, how would you choose to rise? Do you believe that from suffering we can still rebuild a better life? I would love to hear your thoughts and your story. If these words touch your heart, leave a comment below so we can share together. And don't forget to follow the channel to keep hearing more stories about life, about family, and about journeys that rise from the ruins. Maybe in them you'll find a part of yourself.